So the glucose 6 phosphate deficiency has to be one of the most studied deficiencies of the red blood cell pathways. Okay, the red blood cell energy pathways, that's the glycolysis. So you know that glycolysis actually have series of what enzymes that actually help to um, ensure that this pathway actually goes to completion. All right. So if you have deficiencies in any of these enzymes, it usually result into problem. One of the problem is the energy that the red blood cell actually needs will no longer be supplied. Do you understand? So the glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase, deficiency is what we'll be discussing, and we'll just be relating it to the red blood cell and how it will manifest if there's a deficiency. So the glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase, that's the G6PD, it actually functions to reduce nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate, that's the NADP. Okay, it is the only source of what NADPH. That's when you reduce NADP, gives rise to NADPH, and NADPH is needed for the production of what reduced glutathione, and a deficiency of this G6PD will render the red blood cell susceptible to oxidant stress. Why? Because these things will actually help in mopping up all those what agents for oxidative stress. Okay, so there's a wide variety of normal genetic variants of the enzymes, right? About 400 variants. So they just combine all of them together and say G6PD, G6PD, and all that, right? So the most common type is the type B, that's Western, and type A is found in what? Africans. Okay. So the inheritance is sex linked. That means it is actually a disease condition that will actually what is inherited. Okay, so it affects the males. It's carried by the females. That means if you are having XY chromosome, if you are having XX chromosome, right? If it affects one X, you still have another X. If it affects this X in males, there's no other X to come for it, all right? So it affects mainly the males. And females are carriers who show approximately half of the normal red blood cell. Okay, G6PD values, all right? That's in females that are carriers. You'll just be having like half of the number, all right? So this glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency does indeed protect against lethal falciparum malaria. Like somebody that has this deficiency, one of the advantages is you not be having malaria. Okay, it's particularly in childhood, and this protection, especially in the hyperendemic areas, all right, is more than outweighs the hematological problems associated with deficiency. So they are just trying to say that for an individual that has this type of deficiency, if you are staying in a malaria endemic area that you are likely to go down malaria, the advantage of this deficiency protecting you against the malaria actually outweighs. Do you understand? Okay, so the degree of deficiency varies with ethnic group. Okay, and it's often mild with about 10 to 60% of normal activity. All right, in black people, it's more severe in Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian people. It is more severe in Mediterranean people. All right, about less than 10% of normal activity. All right, so severe deficiency occurs occasionally in white people. What is the manifestation? This glucose 6 phosphate deficiency is usually what asymptomatic. Like usually they will not really show symptoms like that. You'll be having a normal blood count between the attacks of hemolysis, and the main clinical syndrome that occur include sometimes when it gets crazy, it could result into what? Acute hemolytic anemia. That's where you are having sudden breakdown of red blood cell, which is not supposed, right? So there will be acute hemolytic anemia coming. Acute hemolytic anemia in response to oxidant stress. That's like drugs, fava beans, or infections, right? So this acute hemolytic anemia is caused by what? Rapid developing intravascular hemolysis with hemoglobinuria. That's the person will be urinating hemoglobin, all right? That means there have been breakdown, severe breakdown, that you are now urinating hemoglobin. The anemia may be self-limiting as new young red blood cells are made with near normal enzyme levels. It could result into neonatal jaundice. Rarely, a congenital non-spherocytic hemolytic anemia could result. Now, these syndromes may result from different types of severe enzyme deficiency, right? So, laboratory features. If you take up a blood sample of somebody that has a glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, you see that there's anemia. Then if you do a peripheral blood film, you see that the red blood cells are fragmented. We call them bite cells or blister cells, okay? Hence bodies on the supravital stains, okay? Features of intravascular hemolysis like hemoglobinuria, hemoglobinemia, and there's increased lactate dehydrogenase levels. The gold standard is a quantitative assay, like you now check for the levels of what? Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase in the body, all right? However, there are screening tests available to identify glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency in red blood cells. These tests can reliably distinguish between deficient and non-deficient individuals, but are not reliably what? Quantitatively. All right. Management is if somebody has this problem, sometimes some drugs can be triggering it. Okay, so try to stop those drugs or avoid them. If there's any underlying infection, treat it. High fluid intake should be encouraged to prevent renal damage. Blood transfusion undertaken where necessary for severe anemia. In severe cases of NNJ, phototherapy and exchange transfusion may be needed. What is NNJ? I wanted to check that out earlier. Okay, coming. Neonatal jaundice. All right. So, if there's neonatal jaundice, phototherapy and exchange transfusion may be needed. All right. Then, in chronic non-spherocytic hemolytic anemia, may be severe enough to warrant active treatment, and splenectomy may also be helpful for that. All right. So I think that's it for the glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. Spoke about the definition, the causes, the management.